there's not much in the way of information about this transmission on YouTube, so I wanted to make this video. It kind of explaining how this transmission works and some of the particulars about it. This transmission's in a 1970 F100 with a 302. It is a Borg-Warner T-85N 3-speed manual transmission with a Borg-Warner R11 overdrive unit. Now, the way this transmission is supposed to work is you take off in first gear, you then shift to second on your column. Somewhere between 27 and 30 mile an hour, this governor here activates, which then sends power to this solenoid, and this shift solenoid clicks. And when you let off the throttle, it allows the overdrive unit to then shift, which becomes your third, and then whenever you shift into third position on the column, that is then your fourth. So this overdrive unit effectively turns this 3-speed manual transmission into a hybrid 4-speed transmission. Now, some people bypass this governor by just putting in a toggle switch to send power to the shift solenoid. If you don't forget about it being on when you take off in first, you'll be fine. So you can take off in first and then have like 2 low, 2 high, 3 low, 3 high, making it a 5-speed transmission. However, you cannot take off in first high. If you forget that you leave the toggle switch on and try to take off in first high, you'll crush the needle bearings in the overdrive unit. This exact overdrive unit I'm not 100% sure about because it is the heavy duty overdrive unit, but generally that is the rule of thumb, is you will completely destroy your overdrive unit by taking off in first high. So it's best to have the overdrive unit and transmission functioning as it should. Now, a couple of notes about this transmission. If you're towing a trailer, like in a truck, there's a cable here which runs up under the dash to a knob that says overdrive. Whenever you pull the cable out, you're effectively locking out the overdrive unit, which will just be like your standard 3-speed transmission, and you'll have engine braking in all 3 gears. With the overdrive unit, locked in and functioning as it should, in first and second gear below 27 mile an hour, you will have no engine braking. In those gears under that mile an hour, if you let off the throttle, the vehicle will just coast. Above the 30 or 27 to 30 mile an hour mark, some transmissions do a little bit different. You will have your standard engine braking. And somebody that's not used to this transmission, they'll kind of freak out too, because as you're slowing down, once you get under that mark again, then you lose all engine braking once again and the truck will just coast. So it takes some getting used to, but once you get used to it, most people love this transmission. This transmission was used a lot by Ford. They were the last ones to use it in the F100 or the F-Series pickup trucks until 1972. In 1972 they did away with it. But another thing to note is when you are in your overdrive gear, your cruising gear, so like your 4th gear, let's just say, and you need to pass somebody, there's a switch on the firewall. You mash the pedal to the floor. This switch kills the power to the shift solenoid, and at the same time, it just for a mere second or two kills the power to the ignition, which kills the engine. Now, this takes all the strain off of the overdrive unit, allowing it to come out and get you back into 3rd gear for your passing gear. This overdrive unit, the way it's designed, if it doesn't take the strain off of the overdrive unit, it will not shift. That's why whenever you shift into second, in order to go into your second high gear or 3rd gear, however you want to look at it, you have to release the throttle and then get back on the throttle, and it'll have made the shift. But I've read online where some people are particularly fond of this overdrive unit and they want to try to find one. From what I can find out, information I can find out, you cannot just slap this unit onto a standard 3-speed transmission or even a T-85 transmission. It has to be set up for this overdrive unit. Something about the splines are different inside of it. And then there was a little bit of difference between applications and years with the transmission itself. Input shaft sizes, input shaft lengths. So you the general rule of thumb is if you find one of these transmissions and you decide that you want to save it or you want to use it, try to get the clutch and everything else that you can out of the donor vehicle, and then in the future when you have to order parts such as a clutch or pilot bearing or whatever, you would order it for the application that the transmission come out of. But as I said, Ford was the last to use this. They quit with it in 1972, and this is one of the more desirable transmissions because the R11 overdrive unit is the heavy-duty overdrive unit. It could be found in some F250s and such, even behind 390 V8s. This truck's got a 302, but maybe this, if anybody has any questions or just curious about this transmission or have one yourself and you don't really know much about it, maybe this will kind of give you a little bit more information than you might have had to begin with. And there's also some books. There's some good books that you can find online that tell you how this transmission works, how it's supposed to work, and how to troubleshoot it, like if something's not working right. Like you can see here, the wiring's frayed on the governor. I mean, if you got a bad connection, of course it won't work properly because it needs electric voltage to work properly. And they also tell you how to take it apart, how to clean it, and how to put it back together. They tell you the oils and stuff that you're supposed to put in this. Best I can remember, you're not supposed to use 80W90 in the overdrive unit, and it is a separate unit. It has its own oil. You can't just check the oil in the transmission and expect it to bleed over in the overdrive unit, as the overdrive unit has its own separate oil system. But anyway, maybe this will kind of answer some questions if some of y'all have some questions. And if you have any more, just drop it in a comment. I'll try to answer it the best I can, or maybe point you into the way of some websites or books that can.